All right, welcome back to another edition of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. We bring you today's labor news, history, and analysis from the U.S. and around the world. This is a podcast you listen to with your fellow workers organizing on the shop floor. This is a podcast you listen to before walking into your union meeting. As always, I'm Rico Rutia, here with my co-host, Brian Pfeiffer. In today's episode, we continue our coverage of the genocide in occupied Palestine. More specifically, we offer coverage of some of the struggles happening here in the U.S. Brian will report on an event that took place earlier this month in Wisconsin, as well as other upcoming events relating to Palestine. Please note that moving forward, our show will offer continued coverage of Palestine and other struggles against occupation, genocide, and war. Of course, we will always maintain our coverage of national and international labor struggles. In this episode, we'll chat about how Teamster members voted 99% to authorize a strike against Anheuser-Busch. Brian will talk to us about the United Auto Workers and OPEIU. I'll get us caught up on the California hotel workers strike and also talk about unionization efforts at Tesla. I'm particularly excited to share the news about Tesla workers. These workers are receiving a great deal of solidarity from other workers who essentially want to bring Tesla's operation to a standstill in Sweden. This in an effort to pressure the company to recognize the union and give in to the workers' demands. So I think this story captures the imagination and shows us that it can actually be done. Workers can withdraw their labor and bring operations to a standstill. And if this sort of thing can be done against an automaker, why not against a war machine? So stay tuned for that story. Finally, we do our best to offer weekly recordings of our show, but sometimes life gets in the way and we're not able to keep up with that pace. If you enjoy our show, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, sharing, talking about the show, anything. However you do it, please go ahead. Today's song is called El Salvador. It's by Christy Moore, an Irish folk singer. Brian is going to further introduce it, and then we'll get started with the show.
Hundreds of millions continue to take the streets across the world in solidarity with Palestine. The Palestinian people are still under siege by the U.S. and Israel's apartheid genocidal campaign, but the resistance around the world and right in Palestine continues. This song here represents the resistance that's happening all across the world. Free Palestine from the river to the sea.
A girl cries in the early morning, woken by the sound of a gun. She knows somewhere somebody's dying beneath the rising sun. Outside the window of her cabana, the shadows are full of her fears. She knows her lover is out there somewhere, he's been on the run for a year. Oh, the soul of El Salvador. The bell rings out on the chapel steeple, the priest prepares to say mass. The sad congregation come tired and hungry to pray their troubles will pass. Outside the sun rises over the dusty streets where the crowd gathers round. Flies and mosquitoes are drinking from pools of blood where his body is found. Oh, the soul of El Salvador. Out on the ranch, the rich man's preparing to go for his morning ride. They've saddled his horse out in the corral. He walks out full of pride. He looks like a cowboy in one of those pictures the president made in the past. The peasants in rags, they stand back, for they know that Enrico gallops fast. Over the soul of El Salvador. the sound of a gun. She knows somewhere somebody's dying beneath the rising sun. Outside the window of her cabana, the shadows are full of her fears. She knows her lover is out there somewhere, he's been on the run for years. Oh, the soul of El Salvador. Oh, the soul of El Salvador. Oh, the soul of El Salvador.
All right, listeners, on December 9th, 2023, here reporting from Madison, Wisconsin, Brian, that we had the first ever largest pro-Palestine statewide march in Wisconsin. Contingents included healthcare workers against genocide and many other unionists under the banner Labor for Palestine. There were speakouts at the Wisconsin Manufacturers Building, and this is a lobbying arm of the capitalists in Wisconsin. Many corporations and banks in Wisconsin do business with Israel and are members of the Manufacturers and Commerce Association. So we stopped there and had a protest there. There were speak-out rallies and a tremendous outpouring of support. Participants came from all over the state of Wisconsin from multiple cities: Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, the Fox Valley, Appleton, and many smaller cities from the west, north, south, and east. A sea of keffiyehs could be seen as folks marched through the streets with banners sponsored by the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine. This is a coalition of over 60 organizations across the state, and this rally and march on December 9th had participation from indigenous nations, including the Ho-Chunk Nation, Lakotas, the Oneida, Menominee, and many others, from the Mexican community, the African American community, and many more. The march was tremendously youthful, student-oriented. The organizing was organized in a space of a few weeks, and youth and students had a fundamental part along with the organizing, along with various Arab and Muslim communities in Wisconsin, both in Madison, Milwaukee, and other locations. Folks also came from places like Racine, Kenosha, and even from Illinois, just south of Wisconsin. There are a variety of different videos on Instagram and photographs on the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine, on Facebook, also at WISCO, that's WISCOFOR, Pally on Instagram. And groups like Wisconsin Bail Out the People movement have a variety of photographs online as well to archive the historic December 9th, first ever pro-Palestine statewide march in Madison, Wisconsin. This action has been followed up with many different actions. The coalition is having a variety of different activities, including Labor for Palestine involved in the coalition is protesting at corporations that make weapons for Israel, and many other activities are also taking place. Sing-outs for Palestine during Christmas, die-ins, and moving forward to the new year, these actions will continue and to increase.
So tell us, Brian, just for the benefit of some of our listeners here, you mentioned that there were many groups involved, union groups, student groups, and that this came together over the course of just a few weeks. What does it take to bring something of that magnitude together in such a short period of time? What made it successful?
Thanks, Rick. Yes, on October 8th, the coalition formed on a Sunday, and it started out with a couple of organizations and then went from there, led by the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Organization, and then proceeded to gain steam. And by mid-October, there was dozens of organizations, and it continued to grow. And with the U.S.-Israeli atrocities that continued to ramp up in the slaughter of children and the horrific war crimes that were taking place, aided and abetted by the U.S. and pushed forward by Israel and the Zionists, more and more activities and more organizations started to join the coalition. And the consensus became that at some point we needed to consolidate our forces to take a step to the next period and support our Palestinian friends and to support those supporting Palestine as well, and to build a coalition, because we know there's been a lot of attacks against those who have been supporting Palestine. But generally, this was a wonderful coalition that has gained steam based on folks supporting each other, supporting Palestine, and supporting each other's events. And there was a proposal put forth by the Wisconsin Bailout the People movement and others to have a statewide march and rally in Madison to consolidate our forces, to bring us all together, and to show the world what we had been doing on the ground in many, many different locations all across Wisconsin, which have been really tremendous. There's been tremendous sacrifices made, and many of these are being made by poor and working people. Many union folks are involved in many of these activities, not just in Milwaukee and Madison, but around the state. The youth and the students and the Arab and Muslim communities are under siege in many ways, of course, as well from the state. So this was the background, of course, to support Palestine, number one, support the Palestinians, and then to support all the activities that are happening. And so we can move forward as one in a coalition with our activities that will be continuing later this year and into the new year.
All right. And just one more question, Brian, just kind of talking about the messaging a little bit and some of the messages that popped up. You already showed me a couple of pictures of the event, and I caught some of the placards, some of the banners that were present there. Could you give us, maybe a couple of the bigger messages that stood out, or a couple of your bigger takeaways, either from the banners, from the placards, from speakers, anything like that? Any big takeaways for you on that end?
Yeah, Rick. I think one of the things that affected myself personally was when there was an organization that sponsored a banner that rolled out right in front of the state capitol in Madison, and it rolled out literally for yards and yards and yards and yards and yards. And it described every single person, including children, that had been massacred up to that day by the US and Israel. And that was a very challenging situation, as you can imagine. And the solidarity that took place and the folks that gathered around and lent their love and understanding and solidarity to those Palestinian people who came there that day was something that I have rarely seen. And it was a very touching day on that. Also, the amount of international solidarity. What I mean by that is the composition of the crowd included many different nationalities with signs. For example, Christians in support of Palestine, or Mexicans in support of Palestine, or Native Americans or indigenous people in support of Palestine, the Labor for Palestine contingent, Queers for Palestine, many different individual union members were there, healthcare workers for Palestine, healthcare workers against genocide, the youth and the students Students for Justice in Palestine, many other different youth and student organizations there in support of Palestine. It was quite a day, and it really set the tone for the future. And the composition of the crowd was together, was united, marched with a 30-foot banner under the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine banner throughout the entire downtown of Madison. Many different speakouts. There was connections between the Black liberation and the Palestinian freedom struggle. That was especially poignant. There was youth speakers speaking, as we said, at the Wisconsin Manufacturers Association Commerce Building. I'm not sure that's the correct full name of it, but essentially the Capitol's lobbying arm in Wisconsin, which has members, corporations, and banks that do business with Israel, and many other speakers on many other topics, and all connecting them to workers. When workers spoke at this event, of course, the line was, why are we having all of our taxpayer money stolen from us to go and to exploit and oppress and massacre the Palestinians when those funds are needed right here at home? And the Palestinians need reparations for what's been done to them. And it was a clear opposition to the US and Israel attacks on Palestine. And the last thing I'll say is that the demands are very clear in this coalition, that it is the US that is behind Israel, the US upholding the settler colonial state of Israel, and the US has complicity. And in fact, right now, as we speak, there are all kinds of bombs and weapons being shipped to Israel, and Israel wouldn't be able to survive one day without the United States propping it up through military means, through economic means, diplomatic measures, and all kinds of other ways. So that was very clear on December 9th, that folks were very clear on these demands, and it was a united opposition to what is happening in Palestine due to the US and Israeli war crimes. So thanks, Rick.
Yeah, as I was saying to you before we started recording today, it's difficult for me not to relate to Palestinians on such a basic level, and it's very understandable when I see other groups of oppressed people identifying with Palestinians. If you've ever felt the humiliation or degradation of racism, it's easy to identify with the Palestinians. If you've ever felt being displaced, having your community gentrified, having to move, being forced out, anything like that, it's easier to identify with the Palestinian people. If you've ever been harassed by the police or beaten down by the police, it's easier to identify with the Palestinian people. So that's where I was coming from. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Also going to try to bring it back home a little bit to some of the news that we usually report on, because that stuff is still happening too. We're definitely going to continue reporting on Palestine, and it'll be the first thing that we talk about in upcoming episodes because of the pressing nature of the situation. But we're also going to continue reporting on labor issues because that's stuff that's happening at home. And just as Brian said right now, that's stuff that's also connected to the Palestinian struggle. Labor for Palestine. Those types of groups can come together here in the U.S. We've already reported on different proclamations or resolutions passed by different unions and how that helps to educate the membership. We will continue to report on all of that, but we're also going to continue to report on the labor struggle here at home. That being said, one of the first ones that I would like to report on comes directly from the Teamster website in the form of a press release. The headline of the press release is "By 99%, Teamsters authorize strike at Anheuser-Busch." And this is how it reads. Teamsters working nationwide at Anheuser-Busch have voted by an overwhelming 99% to authorize a strike. The resounding vote allows the Teamsters National Negotiating Committee to call a strike if Anheuser-Busch fails to come to terms on a strong new contract. The union is seeking an agreement that improves wages, protects jobs, and secures health care and retirement benefits for 5,000 Teamsters across the company's 12 U.S. breweries. The current agreement expires February 29th, 2024. So we're going to make note of that date and keep you informed as to what's happening. But the press release goes on. Quote, Teamsters stand firm in our fight for the best contract at Anheuser-Busch, and this powerful strike vote proves it. Our members' labor, talent, and sacrifice are what put Anheuser-Busch products on the shelf, and we are committed to getting a contract that rewards and recognizes their hard work. Unquote, said Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien. The quote continues, if Anheuser-Busch's executives can't get their act together to negotiate an agreement that respects workers, we will see them out in the streets. Unquote. Under pressure from the Teamsters, the company reached tentative agreements to end tiered health care and restore retiree health benefits last month. However, Anheuser-Busch has delayed negotiating on important job security issues since mid-November, despite repeated requests by the union. The global beer maker pulled in $58 billion in 2022. The company also recently announced $1 billion in stock buyback to wealthy investors as it simultaneously ignores the need to protect good jobs. There are no dates currently set for negotiations. Anheuser-Busch Teamsters recently rallied in New Hampshire, California, and Florida. More actions will take place soon across the country. Now, this is definitely a struggle to watch, and we will keep you updated. This is a struggle to watch, of course, because of what Teamsters just pulled off earlier this year in July against UPS. Just the threat of the strike made UPS come to the negotiating table and give up demands that Teamsters had been making. So we will keep you up to date on that. That was a huge victory for the labor movement. And I think it sets a precedent for what can happen now, or at least give some energy as to what can happen now. Because as we've even reported here in the past, as far as how strikes work, when one group of workers sees another group of workers go on strike and they're successful, that other group of workers is emboldened by the success of the striking workers. So that's what we want to see here. With Anheuser-Busch, so we will keep you updated on what's going on with that. Up next, speaking about another union that recently did go all out and have a strike, a new type of strike, a stand-up strike as they were calling it, is Brian going to speak about the UAW. What's going on there, Brian?
Well, Rick, after the successful strike at the big three, the United Auto Workers are taking it to the South and organizing or attempting to organize a variety of auto shops in the South from a variety of different companies. So we just wanted to flag this for our readers that there is a lot of information on the or listeners at the United Auto Workers Facebook page and also other social media and website that a variety of organizing drives are taking place now in the South. And this is a welcome development, of course. And Sean Fain has spoken on this repeatedly. There's many videos for him on their Facebook page and social media as well. So just alerting readers if you haven't heard about these campaigns, very important. And we've talked on the show previously, talking to United Electrical, Local 150 workers, Black Workers for Justice, et cetera, on how critical organizing the U.S. South is in this country, for a whole variety of reasons. So it's a welcome development. The UAW is organizing there, as well as at other locations too, but especially in the South right now, organize these auto plants, and we wish them well.
We wish them well, and we will keep you updated as those organizing efforts develop here. Up next, I have an article from the LA Times about a strike that we have reported on in the past, but actually haven't touched in a while. The headline of the article reads, "Progress builds towards LA hotel strike settlement as union reaches deals with 10 more hotels." And the body of the article reads as follows. Unite Here Local 11 has reached tentative contract agreements with 10 more Southern California hotels covering hundreds of housekeepers, cooks, dishwashers, servers, and front desk workers who have been pushing for higher wages and better benefits. Momentum is building to resolve the 5-month-old strike that initially involved 60 hotels and more than 15,000 workers and is believed to be the largest hotel strike in U.S. history. In all, 20 hotels have preliminarily agreed to new contracts that will raise wages, strengthen pensions, and increase investments in healthcare, the union said Saturday. You know, Brian, I was recently chatting with a friend of mine. We often have political conversation, and he's more on a liberal tip than myself. But we go back, man. We go back. So it's always a kind, thoughtful political exchange that we have. And he was trying to dig into the labor stuff a little bit more, and I was trying to explain it to him, because he's very much a supporter of people like AOC, the Squad, Bernie, the more progressive left-leaning Democrats, if you will. And again, this was a kind, thoughtful conversation, but what I presented to him was, look at what happened with the Teamsters earlier this year and the 300,000 or so workers that almost went on strike. The strike threat was on the table, and it was a very credible strike threat. That had been practicing and rehearsing and organizing for that. And then you saw what happened with the UAW, and then the Kaiser Permanente workers and the graduate student employees, all of which across the board have made some kind of improvement in their workplace, be it wages, be it healthcare benefits, be it workplace health and safety, whatever the case may be. But they won all those things through direct action, including a strike. And so my counter question to my friend here was, how long would that take to legislate? How long would it take to legislate a 25% wage increase as the UAW won? How long would all this take to legislate 300,000 UPS workers, to legislate better wages and better healthcare benefits and better time off and better control systems in their delivery cars and stuff like how long would all that stuff take to legislate versus look at what striking got us in just a matter of weeks. Look at what solidarity got us. Look at what community union solidarity got us. Like, that's where our mind should be right now, and that's why we do this show. So that's the update on the California hotel workers strike. We will continue to keep you posted on that and let you know what comes out of that. Up next, Brian, you're going to talk to us about OPEIU. What's going on with OPEIU?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. We're happy to report to listeners that the OPEIU, which is the Office and Professional Employees International Union, Local 39 in Madison, Wisconsin, ratified a contract with TrueStage. And we here at We Rise Fighting have interviewed leaders from this local during their very long contract campaign, which has gone on for almost a couple years, off and on. and had a strike last May for 2 weeks. So as of December 15th, they put out a press release then on that day, December 15th, that the members have voted to accept a new labor agreement effective through March 2028, and that this is by far the most participation we've had in a ratification vote at True Stage, said Catherine Bartlett-Moville, the president of OPEIU 39. And we interviewed Sister Catherine a couple months ago. We're honored to do that. Some of the gains in the contract include the highlights of the contract. Sarah Larson, a steward and member of the union's bargaining committee, said we really enhanced the language protecting against discrimination and harassment. It really mattered to our group that we get this in writing from the company. And other highlights included 15.5% retroactive to 2022 and 13.25% over the next 4 years. Remote work enshrined in the contract. Many of these workers are tech workers. They work remotely, so that's critical, plus a monthly allowance for expenses, as working remotely can be very expensive. Pension maintained through the life of the contract. Health insurance, protected integrity of the existing HMO plan, and job security brought more workers under the union's protection and representation. And listeners can find more information at the OPEIU Local 39 Facebook page, also at True Stage Workers United. And we were honored here at We Rise Fighting to interview the leaders of this local as they prosecuted their campaign for their contract, which they have just successfully won. So salute to them and solidarity to our fellow workers at Local 39 in Madison, Wisconsin. Off to you, Rick.
Right on. Thank you, Brian. And going to close it off tonight talking about Elon Musk and Tesla. I found this article in the Associated Press. The headline reads as follows: Musk and Tesla are battling unions across Scandinavia. What comes next in the labor dispute? Let's hear it, Associated Press. Here we go. Tesla has found itself locked in an increasingly bitter dispute with union workers in Sweden and neighboring countries. This showdown pits the electrical car maker CEO Elon Musk, who's staunchly anti-union, against the strongly held labor ideals of Scandinavian countries. None of Tesla's workers anywhere in the world are unionized, raising questions about whether strikes could spread to other parts of Europe where employees commonly have collective bargaining agreements, notably in Germany, Tesla's most important European market. Here are key things to know about the union fight, again, according to the Associated Press. How did the Tesla strike gain steam? About 130 mechanics at 10 Tesla garages across Sweden walked off the job on October 27th, over the company's refusal to sign a collective bargaining agreement. Tesla doesn't have a factory in Sweden, but does have a network of service centers. Since the mechanics with the powerful Swedish metalworkers union, IF Metal, went on strike, other workers around the country have joined in sympathy, withholding their services to pressure the company. Many of the country's transport unions say they'll stop collecting waste from Tesla service centers starting Sunday, and this is going back to last week. Employees with supplier hydro extrusions, which makes aluminum profiles, are refusing to make a component for Tesla cars. Other unions say their members won't paint Tesla cars, clean the company's offices, or service electrical systems at its workshops or any of its 70 charging stations in Sweden. Postal workers have stopped delivering license plates for new Tesla vehicles, prompting Tesla to sue the Swedish transport agency, demanding that it be allowed to retrieve the plate, and PostNord, the company that delivers the registration numbers. Tesla lost an early battle in the case, which is still working through the courts. The boycott was escalated by spreading to neighborhood Nordic countries. Like in Sweden, dock workers in Denmark won't unload Tesla vehicles arriving at ports. Unions in Finland and those in Norway have warned that workers at ports and workshops will join the strike if the dispute isn't resolved by Wednesday. What has Elon Musk said? He's never hidden his disdain for unions, writing, quote unquote, "This is insane" on his social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, in response to a tweet about Swedish postal workers refusing to deliver license plates. In the US, Musk has picked online fights with the United Auto Workers and vehemently battled union legal challenges to his company's actions. Quote, "I disagree with the idea of unions," unquote, Musk said in a November onstage interview with the New York Times. And the quote continues, "I just don't like anything that creates kind of lords and peasants sort of thing." Isn't that a fascinating quote there. I just don't like anything that creates a lords and peasants sort of thing. Good Lord. Get the fuck out of here, man. That's the whole point of capitalism, bud. You know, maybe not lords and peasants anymore. Maybe these days capitalists and wage labor, but it's still that same class dynamic, my friend. So just hate to mention that, but it's not unions creating that. If anything, unions are there to protect the rights of the oppressed, the exploited, the workers on the job. So, of course, I disagree with Elon Musk. That probably went without saying. But nevertheless, this stuff is out there. It's unfolding right before our eyes. So, just wanted to keep everyone up to date with what's going on with that, especially considering the new activity that has been happening with the United Auto Workers here in the US. So we will continue to keep you posted on that. Thank you for chiming in this week. Brian's got a couple more words and then we'll be wrapping it up.
All right, Rick, we're going to wrap this up. We discussed a lot of this on the show today, and it all relates. So we're going to let our listeners here know that there is a variety of union support for Palestine. And in terms of the UAW, which Rick just mentioned, UAW President Shawn Fain has officially called for a U.S.-Israeli ceasefire. Fain made the announcement at a press conference in D.C. earlier this month with Representatives Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib and UAW Region 9A Director Brandon Mancia, among others. This is a huge development for U.S. labor, and that press conference can be viewed in many different locations, including on our Facebook page, We Rise Fighting. Following that up, Brother Shawn Fain will be a featured speaker, as well Rashida Tlaib, she's from the Metro Detroit area, at the 21st Annual Detroit MLK Rally and March in honor of the actual historic legacy of Dr. King. This will be at the St. Matthew's, St. Joseph's Episcopal Church on Woodward and Holbrook in Detroit. It'll be 12 noon to 3 p.m. And this is bringing together much of what we have shared on the show this evening. This event will bring together a heightening struggle, of course, the heightening struggle for labor rights and against imperialist war across the United States and the world. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and President Fain will be there, as well as co-chaired by Aurora Harris, lecturer in African American Studies at the University of Michigan Dearborn, and Abiyami Azikiwe, editor of the Pan-African Newswire, who we interviewed here a couple weeks ago on We Rise Fighting. The rally and march will also feature other speakers and artists, including attorney Nancy Parker, executive director of the Detroit Justice Center, and Wardale Montgomery, Detroit poet and songwriter. A host of speakers and artists from the Detroit area will make presentations, highlighting the wealth of community organizers and cultural workers in southeastern Michigan. A broad coalition of these social forces is happening at this march and rally, and it will be definitely needed, of course, in the coming year to meet the challenges facing the people of the city, the country, and the globe, states a press release from the Detroit MLK Committee. Listeners can find more information on the MLK Detroit MLK Facebook page or email panafnewswire@yahoo.com. That's PANAFNEWS wire@yahoo.com, or call 313-671-3715. And on this show, We Rise Fighting, we have reported ever since our beginning Detroit developments frequently, including this past year. So at the event this year in Detroit, the MLK event, there will be casino workers, of course, UAW workers that have been in motion in Detroit, striking in a variety of different ways, as well as social justice organizations. The event is free and open to the public, and we look forward to seeing you there. Lastly, the National Week of Action for Palestine will be January 1st to the 7th, 2024, and that will be sponsored by the U.S. Palestinian Community Network and many other organizations, and they will be holding nationwide actions, rallies, marches, and a variety of other similar actions across the entire country in cities, big and small. That National Week of Action, January 1 to 7, 2024, and look for more information on the U.S. Palestinian Community Network page. So we're closing up the year with struggle, and we're going to continue to struggle and free Palestine.
That's right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be back with you next week, hopefully. Once in a while, life gets in the way, so we have to step away from the microphone and attend to life. So if you like the show and you want to stay current, please go ahead and subscribe, go ahead and like, go ahead and share, go ahead and talk about whatever your thing is. But please stay tuned, and we will be back next week.
Love and solidarity to all. Happy New Year, everyone. Take care.